Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Life Interrupted webinar, part of a webinar series in collaboration with the McGill Alumni Association and the Life After Your Degree program. With us today is Strategic Communications and Public Relations expert and alumna Paula Bernardino to speak on the topic of staying socially connected through remote networking. Paula Bernardino is a course lecturer in the Public Relations program at McGill and a senior business partner at Catalyst Communication. She is a strategic communications management professional with over 15 years of experience and has acquired expertise in corporate communications and public relations, working for large global corporations and not-for-profit organizations. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that you could submit questions using the chat box feature on the sidebar, and we will be answering your questions during the Q&A portion at the end of this webinar. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Paula, and I will now turn things over to you to begin.
Great. Thank you, Antonia, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be part of this webinar. Welcome everyone, and thank you also for taking the time this afternoon to be on this webinar. So I'll take you through my journey of this pandemic and dealing with it, and then being able staying socially connected and remaining doing my network, because as an independent consultant this was really important for me. But you'll see, I'll take you through the journey. There's going to be some psychology, there's going to be some communications, public relations in there, and then hopefully you'll leave with some key takeaways and also some tips. And there's different tips and different ways of embracing being socially connected. So let me take you back to March, specifically March 12th. So this was the day COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. Where were you? I know I was having drinks with a colleague at the end of the day. That was a Thursday. I remember I was at Place Ville Marie, Qatar, and this whole global pandemic, rumor and discussions were going on, and we had no idea what it meant. And I was supposed to teach a class the next day. I was teaching classes on Friday evenings. And then suddenly I get the email from McGill that the class is canceled. So what did I do the following day? I was happy to have a Friday off finally, but then bad news continued. What was I doing a week later? Wondering, okay, well, what's going to happen to the semester? How are we going to end the semester? And then a month later, the semester was over. And then I was wondering, well, where is this going now? And where are my leads, my contracts that I had, in the pipeline? Where is that going? So this was what COVID-19 meant for me in March 2020. I was supposed to be a guest speaker at 2 major conferences, and those got canceled. I'll talk about what happened later. And I was supposed to be judging at 2 major competitions in Montreal. One was the CSR competition at HEC at the Montreal University, and the other one was at the Net Impact Group at McGill. And to me, that was very frustrating and very depressing, because as an independent consultant, you work and you put out so much actions to get to these opportunities. So for the past 6 months, I'd worked so hard to get these opportunities, and all of a sudden they're gone. So all I kept getting was cancellations, cancellations, cancellations in my email inbox. And then I came across this article, which was at a good time. And by the way, you're going to get the list of all the sources at the end of the PowerPoint, so you don't have to worry of writing it down. So this was a time where you were hearing a lot of people saying, we're in this together, it's going to be okay. We're seeing all these rainbows going up, in the city. And to me, like, that wasn't ready. That was not the message I wanted. And I came across this article and I thought this was interesting. This is what I needed. And it's really that time to grieve was really, for me, key here, based on what everybody and a lot of people were going through. This was at the, early April. So to me, going through this big challenge was about, you need the time you have to take the time to grieve what you've lost so you can move forward and look at what's going to happen later. I also came across this really interesting reading that I'd never heard of, the Stockdale Paradox. So who is Stockdale? James Stockdale was a naval officer, and he was a prisoner of war in Vietnam. He was in prison for 7 years, tortured, and he made it. He came back home, and during a lot of interviews, they asked him, like, how did you make it? Like, how did you, get out of there? Well, how did you survive? And he said, basically, I remained realistic And I knew that I was in a bad situation, but remained hopeful. And then they would ask him, well, who didn't make it? And he said, well, the optimist, the one that would say, well, we're going to be out of here by Christmas. Then Christmas came, they were still prisoners. And then they would move their target and say, we're going to be out of here by Easter. Then Easter came, and then they were still in that situation. So basically, like the Stockdale Paradox became, you have to remain hopeful while also being realistic that, you know, you're facing some harsh situations, and there's like, you know, you have to prepare for bad things. So to me, this was really what was going through, well, what everybody was going through in April with the pandemic, not really knowing where this was going and how we were going to, you know, end this. It also got me thinking about the Cobbler-Ross grief cycle. So Elizabeth Cobbler-Ross was a psychiatrist, American psychiatrist, and she came up with this cycle. She studied patients with long-term diseases or terminally ill patients. So she came up with this cycle. She says people go through these 5 cycles. So first there's denial, then there's anger, then bargaining when you start, you know, struggling with what it means and you start reaching out to others. Then you'll face, you know, a period of depression, and then you end up finally accepting it. And what's interesting with this cycle is that not everybody goes through the stages at the same time and spends the same amount of time in each cycle. And from this grief cycle came an adaptation for the business world. So this is something that I teach in my classes in internal communications, so the Cobbler-Ross change curve. So anybody doing change communications will be following this. So for example, with the pandemic, when COVID-19 was hit, I can guarantee you people doing internal communications, employee communications, were using this model. So basically you have to follow what the people will be following in these phases. There's a phase of shock. So that's what we went through in March when, you know, the pandemic was global. You know, there might have been some denial when everything was being canceled. There's frustration. And then at the lowest, you know, the peak is depression. But then slowly you start to go up, experiment. So, you know, initial engagement with the new situation, because this is now a new situation. And then decision, you learn how to cope with this new situation. And finally, integration, it becomes part of your new reality. And that's what we're hearing also, this new reality, the new normal. So, you know, if we look at a society, we are now probably all together in the decision phase, but, you know, we also have to acknowledge that some people might still be in the depression phase, some people might still be in the frustration phase. Like I said earlier, not everybody goes through the same phases at the same time, and we need to respect that. A couple of weeks ago, I was attending this webinar by McMaster University, and Dr. Eva Klein was on. She's a corporate and clinical psychologist and professor of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neuroscience at the McMaster University. And she said something that to me was very crucial. And I really wanted to put this in this webinar today. We are social animals and crave interaction. So going back to that, you know, image that I showed you about the, you know, the different phases, depending on where you are, eventually that social need will be part of where you are, and you will want to reach out. So this is just normal. But now we have to adapt, you know, our wanting to be social and, you know, craving interaction with our new reality. And our new reality now is being online. So what has become really popular, of course, in the last 3 months is Zoom. Zoom has made people be able to reach out, connect, stay connected socially. It has become the #1, the most important app. Why? Because it's easy, it's accessible, affordable, reliable, and it's fun. So anybody can get an account on Zoom. You just have to go on Zoom's you know, official website. You sign up, you get an account. And the first 30 minutes of every Zoom video conference is free. You could obviously upgrade if you want. So you have more time, you could have an hour, whatever. I personally don't feel the need to have an upgraded Zoom account. Like 30 minutes is good enough. And you can have as many people as possible. And I mean, you've probably seen those pictures of, you know, 50, 30 people on a Zoom call. So it's interesting. It's also, you can get to see the other person, so the video is also an interesting feature. And then also, if you are a big group, for example, 20 or 25, 30, you have the breakout room session, which is also interesting. So you can break down your group in smaller groups for more intimate discussions and then get back together as a big group. So Zoom is interesting because it was used before the pandemic as a webinar platform, so more for professional development. And then it became a social platform for pandemic, for friends and families to stay together, stay connected. And then, of course, McGill will be using Zoom, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. So, I mean, this is also goes to show that even universities have chosen Zoom because it's an easy platform to integrate. Of course, there's been some issues. It came up pretty early, about Zoom bombing. That's when someone gets in your room, your meeting, and has not been invited. There are ways now of overcoming that. There's tricks, and then of course there's also the privacy issues that came up. But let's be honest, I think none of the platforms are 100% secure. There's always some risk, even if you're using Skype or any other. So, I mean, the risks are there, but I think the risks are minimal, regardless of which platform you're using. So I also will be sharing this. You'll see this link to this video on the sources page. I thought this would be fun to share with you guys because once you will be doing more, social connecting, especially with Zoom, with your classes in the fall, I thought this was an interest. I'm usually not into these videos, but I thought this one was only 10 minutes. It was very well done. So really 5 tips to make sure that your video calls are a success. And it's like, find your lighting spot, find your profile angle, avoid distractions, obviously, of course. But nowadays, it has become normal and acceptable to see your cats and dogs on your video conferences. But also, prepare your look. And also, never forget if your camera is on, so people will see you. And then dress for your business. So basically, maybe like when you're doing your video conferences for your classes, you want to dress up a little bit as if you were going to class. It's going to help you. Or if you're doing a video conference because you're meeting someone or you're doing an interview, you'll dress up maybe more business-like instead of, in your sweats or pajamas if you're doing it with a friend. So that's what it means. I also wanted to share these tips. Also, it's important to reduce your time, especially if you're working from home or you're spending a lot of time at home. Don't default to Zoom only. We've also been hearing this new term called Zoom fatigue because everybody that was relying on Zoom, don't forget there's other platforms, there's other ways. You can still, reach out to people by telephone. So it's really to mix it up so you don't get, fatigued and with, screening time. So limit also your time, meeting times. For example, don't do back-to-back meetings if possible. Choose physical over digital, like I was saying. Maybe you could take notes on a piece of paper sometimes instead of, always being on your computer. Move as much as possible and take tech-free breaks. It's really for your good. So that way, when you have to be on your computer, you'll be more energized. This is another interesting article that I liked that to me was positive and helping us get through this weird times that we're going through. So don't feel like you wasted 2020. Focus on what you've gained. I'm sure that, already 3 months into this pandemic, and then even at the end of the summer, there are things that you will realize that you've accomplished. So that's what you should be focusing on, is what have you done instead that you would not have done if you had not been in lockdown, for example, and focus on those things. And also try to be, practice gratitude over, those gains. And that's going to help you move forward. And then reinventing your career in time of coronavirus. That's interesting. And you know what? It is possible. I was just reading an article last week. 8% of employees in Quebec, only 8% want to go back to an office space. So that changes the workforce, tremendously. And then also 41% of employees in Quebec are actually looking for another job. This whole pandemic has made people start thinking about, what's important and not important for them. So this article gives you a few tips. Like, for example, develop many possible selves. And that just means we all have multiple passions. We all have different options. So maybe this is a good time to kind of explore. It could be some, projects that you do, and just try to look into that. What have you had in the back of your mind that you wanted to explore? Embrace the liminal period. So that's the period where you're still debating between making the switch, making the move, and just staying where you are. So that's another time where just look down and focus and reflect on what you're good at. What have been your accomplishments? So what trends are you seeing there? And like I was saying, get going with projects. For example, I discovered Coursera in April. So I took 2 courses. I took one that is really popular. It's by Yale. It's the Science of Happiness, just for the fun. And there's many courses there. They're free. So if you want to just explore, what other options, passions that you have. Work your dormant ties. So those are people in your network that you probably have not been in touch for maybe a year or 2, but they're still in your network. You might like their posts once in a while. So this is a good time. Like everybody's kind of has some time. So it's a good time to just connect and say, hey, what have you been up to? Or, hey, I'm looking to do something different. And do you have any tips? Or this is what I'm thinking of, looking at. Do you have any advice? That kind of thing. And it goes with the 5th tip, that's talk it out. So talk it out means if you have ideas of changing, your career or exploring new avenues, it's really good to express it. Express it to the people that might see opportunities and might help you. So, overall also in this whole, pandemic time, and as we're spending more time socially online, don't forget your social media. So don't forget your visibility and your activity on social media. There is no reason why you should not be as active now as you were before. There was a time maybe in March and April where people kind of like, stood back and took a bit of a break, but now things are getting back to normal. So, share what, like how you would be sharing before. What are you doing? And then if you're doing new projects, like share that on your social media, because you never know, like that might bring other people in your network, might give you some tips, and might lead you to meet new people. So basically for now, my 5 takeaways for you is, where are you in the grieving stage? Because you do have to go through that grieving stage so you can be ready to move forward and embrace the new, the new reality. I'm sure you have gains. So, identify the gains so far. Identify the people you want to connect with and you want to stay in touch. Also mix up your channels. So, use your telephone, your emails, your video conference, have fun. And enrolling in your project, like I was saying, webinars nowadays, I know that up until the fall, most webinars will be free. So take advantage of that. If you find some webinars, just sign up. And also, like I said, go explore Coursera. There's a lot of interesting courses out there. Universities like University of Michigan, for example, that you would not have even thought of doing a class with that university. And they have, they have courses on there, and they're free. So what happened to me? So like I was saying, March was very difficult for me. It was very frustrating, and April too. But then things started to turn around. Like I remained socially active on social media, especially on LinkedIn. That's really where I focus my professional activity. So what happened was those 2 conferences are still on, but they're virtual. So the CPRS transformation that was supposed to happen in Quebec in May did not happen physically, but it's next week. It's online, so 1 day online. And then the one that was supposed to happen at the end of May in Milano, in Italy, is now a 1-day virtual conference in September, and I prepared for that one too. So you know what? It's going to be different opportunities for me, but it's still going to be opportunities to network and get my name out there. And then also I got a new contract with Catalyst and a new contract with the Canadian Race Relations Foundation. And this was also through LinkedIn, by being there and people just seeing, that you're there. So, don't forget, like I say, your social media presence is really important. So, make sure that you're there. You continue to do your posts and you continue to like and you continue to connect with people. And then for students, fall expectations. So as you know, like McGill has announced that all courses will be online in the fall. I will share with you that McGill has been really great at helping us instructors move online. So I finished this winter semester online, 2 weeks on Zoom, but it was just with like very quick, do it, get it done. But now we actually have webinars every week on, little details like doing polls online, like, engaging students online, the breakout rooms on Zoom. So very specific training. So a lot of your instructors are going through that training. So expect a lot more interaction, but online. So, if you are doing a Zoom class, you probably will have more interaction with your colleagues, and also more interaction on discussion boards on my courses, because this is really the word we got from the university, is just make sure that there's engaging activities and time for students this semester in the fall. And also, I would say, embrace it. So, if you're not familiar with Zoom, this summer could be something that you decide to do, like you become familiar with Zoom so that you could be ready in the fall, and you could probably help some of your colleagues and, fellow students as well. And, if you're looking for jobs, this is also a good time to continue looking. And what's interesting is that as you know, a lot of jobs are now being done remotely. So a lot of companies are open. I've actually seen like that first sentence in the job posting says, job to be done remotely. Until the end of the year, this is the expectation. No employer will ask and you are expected to be physically in an office. So it has opened, opportunities for jobs that probably would not have been accessible and available before this pandemic. So basically what I want to leave with, the magic is really embrace difference. This is going to be different, so just embrace it to be different. I mean, don't be afraid of the fall semester online. It's going to be different. Expect some issues sometimes, some tech issues maybe. It's going to be different. But it's not going to be bad. So that's what I want to leave you with. So this is a list of all the sources that I mentioned on my presentation. So you will get a copy, so you don't have to worry about that. Good. So I would like to really get your questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Paula, for sharing your insights and tips on remote networking and staying socially active online. Something I think we can all surely benefit from during this time, as you said, as we are defining what the new normal is for each of us, but differently. It's very interesting to think about the phases that we're going through, like you mentioned, as we learn to balance our social wants and needs with this new remote reality. So now I'd like to start the Q&A portion of this webinar. We have some questions that were submitted in advance that we could start with, and if you have any others, please send them in the chat box feature on your sidebar. So we'll start with one that was sent in. How do you suggest getting larger groups involved and engage with each other during online social activities, whether in the virtual classroom or on your personal time or students' personal time?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to talk a lot about Zoom. To me, it's the platform that I adopted, and I really like that feature they have of the breakout rooms. So that's fantastic, because let's say if you're a group of 50, you could do 5 groups of 10, or 10 groups of 5, and it's done automatically. So you get to know that little group, and that to me would be like that initial way of getting a big group to network and get to know them. Yeah. And then the video really helps with that.
Okay. Yeah. And you would suggest this like both used within classrooms and then outside too for social, for social sharing and meetups? Yeah.
It's interesting because you saw a lot of people just do it, like their happy hours. Yeah. A lot of it like that, but they were doing it as a big group. But yeah, you can break it down.
Great. So I have another one. Do you have any advice for students who are preparing to start their first fully remote semester in the fall? Things to prepare in advance, maybe changing the ways they maybe study for something, or depending on the class?
Yeah, it's yeah, well, learning the platform will be like number one, the number one exercise. So, but it's like I said, Zoom is really interesting. It's really easy. There's tutorials, so it's really easy, very, you know, hands-on, friendly. So learning that, so if you're doing it, if you're doing live classes, will be like that first step.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, expect what's going to happen is you're probably going to see instructors using my courses more for using forums, and you're using discussions. So that would just, I think the learning curve will be to learn how to use those platforms, because that was not done before. So it'll be, so that will be interesting, but they're so easy, you know, but that's going to be the difference. You know, another thing that, you know, we are being asked as instructors is to be creative. So, you know, the expectation of being 3 hours on Zoom is not the best. So it's, you know, we'll, as instructors, like, kind of what I'm trying to be more creative is I'll probably do 1 hour and then put a link to a video or a webinar, and then students can do it on their own. So that is going to be different. So, you know, as long as students are disciplined, so if, you know, and do all the work, but it actually might be a little bit easier because as instructors, we also have to make sure, and we have to be more careful this semester to make sure that the students are following and they're
Mm-hmm.
not falling behind. So in a sense, you know, it's going to be a little bit easier in that way.
Thank you. Another question. Someone wrote that, I guess, being in isolation, motivation is a little hard to attain. Being in a different environment, you know, it's a little bit harder to maintain that learning focus in order to benefit from your courses. They ask, how do I avoid procrastination? So do you have any advice or any tips on, you know, creating an environment for yourself while being remote in order to focus more or avoid, I guess, doing other things around the house? It's really,
Yeah, that's a challenge, and it's always a danger. I think, you know, when it comes to give yourself, so break down, you know, your projects in smaller steps. So, you know, and then do a calendar. What I like to do is, like, I'll do a calendar and I'll do a little box, so then I can just check it off when I'm done. So break it down in different tasks so that you know you're progressing a little bit until, you know, you've reached it. This could be also an opportunity to create a virtual, I'm not going to say a reading class, but a little group of students, so you guys can do some check-ins once in a while. Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
So we have a few questions, more career related, and looking into the online networking world for help and insight on that. So one question is, considering the current situation, how would you suggest personally approaching hiring managers to ask about recruitment or opportunities in the digital age?
Yeah. So yes, that's a very good idea. Very good, good step. If you're able to find the hiring manager, to reach out to that person and ask about how it works with their recruitment, because different companies might be using different ways of recruiting. So, you know, get the insight into, like, how that specific company handles their recruitment. And then it's always good to have that connection, because they might end up putting you on their list. So whenever something comes up, whenever they have a job opportunity, you will get that information as well. Or, you know, if you connect with that person on LinkedIn and that person posts a new job posting on LinkedIn, you will see it. So the connection is there. So that's always good. I would say if you can, you know, identify the recruiting managers, It's always a good idea. Also, you might get, because you get information about like how their recruitment process works, but also kind of times, when are good times, when do they have job postings, when do they have job fairs, that kind of information. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So someone's asking, I have just graduated and would like to know how to effectively network online to expand career prospects. So this, it kind of adds to what we were just talking about. But I know you had mentioned LinkedIn. Someone else also asked, I would love to know more about social networking options via LinkedIn. So in terms of if someone had no clue on where to go and how to
Yeah.
connect with people for career
So you
opportunities.
can, yeah, so you can search for people on LinkedIn. I always have people say, oh, go look on my LinkedIn, go look at my contacts and ask, let me know who, and then you can get virtually introduced to that person. But also look for groups on LinkedIn, because there are professional groups, there are, groups of, I don't know, women in technology, or, people who have an interest in HR, for example. So you join those groups, because then you're part of the discussion, and then you're meeting people. And then you can also become involved, and you can become active in that group, and you get noticed. And then also, just to go back, the question about recruiting, getting to know recruiting managers. Also, another good way on LinkedIn is follow the companies that you're interested in, because once you follow that company, if they have jobs, you will see it. You will see the posts, and then you also see who is in charge of recruitment.
Very true.
Yeah.
There's some good tidbits on LinkedIn if you become aware of them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So another question is talking about now in the online age, of COVID, which do you have an opinion on which industries might be more preferable for students to look into, or who might be looking to obtain remote opportunities that might be booming now in the time of COVID?
Well, it's interesting. I think the majority of the companies with office jobs have realized that their employees could do the work at home. And I don't think, like I said, the statistics came out last week, only 8% of employees in Quebec want to go back to the office. So companies have to realize that they have this really big issue. They can't go back. And it's interesting, because about 5 years ago, where I worked, we started introducing the work from home concept as a bonus for employees. So work from home once a day, once a week. And some managers were not into it. They were like, oh no, I need to see my employees in front of me. I need to make sure that they're working. And this situation just made everybody realize work is, achievable at home. So I would say any company, if you're doing office, like I saw banking was very against it, and insurance, because they felt like, oh no, well, we have a lot of data on our computers and we can't let people work from home. But they realized if you add the security, if your IT works with the security, that's not an issue. So I mean, any industry, I'm thinking of everybody working from home. Everybody's working from home. So insurance, nonprofits, associations, even university.
Yeah. Yep.
No, even the universities. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're all in the same boat, more or less. Um, Great. So I have another question. You mentioned a little bit about computer fatigue and combating that. Do you have any further advice to tackle that if it becomes a
Yeah.
more common issue?
Yeah. Well, I know for me was, in April, and then like all these webinars were free, and I wanted to do them all, and I could have like 6 meetings, webinars back to back. So not even had time to go up and get a coffee or whatever. So that to me is like the tip that I suggest is just make sure you give yourself a break. So maybe you can do 2 hours in a row, and then you need a break, because you won't be able to do a 3rd hour in a row. So know yourself, but definitely, putting breaks there, because otherwise if you spend the whole, and that's what happened with the Zoom fatigue thing, was that everybody was moving all their meetings to Zoom. I think people realize too, like when you worked in the office space and you were like in in meetings for 5 hours, you don't really realize it, but when you're in front of a computer, it was just people were going insane. So to me, that's the thing, like really, put in a break so you don't have like a lot of back to back. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I notice it too. It strains the eyes a bit,
Yeah.
breaks, makes it healthier. Okay, another question. Okay, one person says, I'm an introvert. So for those of us who aren't normally comfortable networking in a normal environment, having to go through the online channels and find virtual network platforms, do you have any advice on those who might not be as comfortable? Any tips to become a little bit more comfortable networking online or putting themselves out there?
I think start slow, for example, like maybe connect with one person a week, for example. And because in general, I find the success for networking is being comfortable. If you're not comfortable in even when before the face-to-face, if you were not being yourself and authentic, the network was not going to work anyways, right? So obviously, if you're an introvert, you're probably not posting, every day, for example. But maybe you're posting it once a week, right? So that's good enough because it's about you. It's about who you are. So maybe spend more time actually, looking at exactly who you want to connect with or what you want to connect with, and then move forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great, thanks. I have another question. Do you think that using the platform such as Zoom, will affect the quality of the education for certain things over others, or benefit certain aspects of lecturing in a course or getting that information through to the students? And are there ways to overcome such obstacles?
No, I think it's going to be different. Just the delivery is going to be different. But like I said, like I said, we have so many sources. Like the university has been great at giving all these sources and all these webinars on tips to make, the delivery of the classes as well fun and creative and different. So like I said, we're probably going to see different things in these classrooms this fall. More access maybe to, instructors might be able to have access to different guest speakers that would not have been possible doing it physically in the class. So it's going to be different. I suspect more creativity, also more interaction online, of course, but more interaction for sure. I would just say that the danger would be missing the classes, because then the classes are going to be recorded, right? So then you're stuck finding time to listen to the recording, and then that just could derail, because if you miss one or two or three, then you have like this bunch of videos that you have to listen to. So that to me is, I think, like any other semester, like make that commitment that if you have classes on Monday, that you block that time to be there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then it will help, because if you have any questions, you could ask them directly at that moment instead of having to write an email to your professor or find that time, I guess. That's what.
Yeah. But I do think what's going to happen is, instead of focusing maybe everything like that evening, you'll see answers come in throughout the week, because not everybody's going to be at the same pace. Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
All right, I have another question. You had mentioned that there's safety risk in any platform, but do you have a preference, or what are the more safer platforms that you suggest people engage on? Are there safer platforms versus others, or there's
no. Yeah, I think no. But I like how Zoom quickly responded, because they were getting a lot of slack. They were quick at responding. So now it's a question of really knowing how to protect yourself. So for example, you can lock your meeting room once everybody's in. You can make sure there's a password so people need a password to get in. So there's all these different, but this is all of them. All the platforms have these different tricks. So, if you're worried about security, you just have to find those tricks to increase your security. So it's not a problem. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So this question kind of dives into the world of public relations and communications work. Any suggestions for public relations work, how to interact with wider audiences without physical events, removing that function from the industry at the moment?
Yes. So, all the local associations, so IBC Montreal or CPRS, they've all been virtual these last 3 months. So, like I know in Montreal, we had a little pajama party, happy hour. Ottawa did it also, and Hamilton. So look out for that, because they will also be offering, continue to offer virtual events. Networking events, more focused on networking, but also professional development events. The World Conference was just online last week. So this is going to continue for a little while. And and like any other event, so if you are part of a webinar or any virtual event, and someone makes a comment and you want to connect with that person, you can always reach out to the host to be connected with that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then for one last question, I guess if you were to leave us with the most one piece of solid advice for staying socially connected, the most powerful tip that you use most, or that I guess overshadows the rest, what would it be to end?
Just be yourself, be authentic. There's no reason why you should change from who you were 4 months ago. So yeah, just be yourself.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you again for everyone for joining us, and Paula for being here to answer our questions as well and to present to us on this topic. A follow-up email with today's recording and a feedback survey will be shared to everyone shortly by email. Please stay tuned for further online offerings that we'll provide through the Life Interrupted webinar series, and we hope to see you at one of our next ones. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paula, again.
Thank you, Antonia. Take care. Bye.